Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's entitled Agency and Empowerment for Adolescent Girls Beyond COVID-19. And this event is hosted by ODI in partnership with UNICEF and Gage. And this is a second event in a series on girls and women's voice and leadership for transformative change. My name is Nicola Jones. I'm a Principal Research Fellow at ODI, and I'm also the Director of the Gender and Adolescence Global Evidence Research Consortium based here at ODI. So today's webinar is part of the side events for the 65th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, and the priority theme this year is women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls as its priority theme. So the discussion today is going to draw attention to the key ingredients of empowering girl intentional approaches, and we want to share perspectives from promising practices in low and middle income country contexts across a wide range of sectors, from sexual and reproductive health through to STEM. And obviously it's a really critical juncture to be reflecting on these questions in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So one of the priorities that we need to be foregrounding is how can we really ensure that responses post-pandemic are designed so as to reshape support for adolescent girls programming and really anchoring them in girls' voices, leadership, and ambitions. So the webinar, as I've said, will inform discussions for CSW 65, which is starting next week, but also with the intention to build up some discussion and momentum ahead of the Mexico and France Beijing Plus 25 events that are coming up in March and June of this year. So I'd like to start by welcoming our really incredible panel that we have joining us today. So I'll start with some introductions. So firstly, we're delighted to have Dr. María del Carmen Calle, who's the Executive Secretary of the Pan-Andean Health Organization. María has extensive experience in governmental health at both national and international levels, and is a champion of adolescent girls' sexual and reproductive health rights. We also are very excited to have with us Selin Ozunaldim. She's the founder of Girls Who Code Turkey and a youth representative for the He for She movement in Turkey, and also the founder of the Girls Who First movement. So welcome to you, Selin. Then we also have with us Kenan Madi, who's a program manager with UNICEF Jordan. Thank you so much for joining us, Kenan. Kenan's been working with UNICEF to support coordination of critical life-saving services and supplies for refugees in different emergency settings. And currently he manages the Makani program, which provides an integrated packages of services for adolescents and children, including learning support services, skills building, and community-based child protection. I'm also delighted to be co-hosting this event today with Prerna Banati. She's a Senior Regional Advisor for Gender and Adolescent Girls in UNICEF's West and Central African Office. And Prerna has over 20 years of international development experience within the UN and other international agencies, and focuses on the intersection of gender, adolescence, and social inclusion. So welcome, Prerna. And then last but certainly not least, we're delighted to have with us Arlette Mvondo. So Arlette is a regional policy advisor with UN Women, also in Western Central Africa, and has 20 years of international development experience within the UN with a strong focus on gender-based violence prevention and response. So thank you also very much for joining us. And then I'd like to welcome everyone who's joined online today. We had a great sign up from over 38 countries, so we're delighted to be having this conversation with you all. I'd like to let you know that we will be taking questions from the audience a bit later on in the session, so please do post your questions in the chat box. And then also feel free to join the discussion on Twitter using at ODI Dev or at Gage_program. We'd love to have the conversation going on in the digital space as well. And the Twitter handles of the speakers are included. Just one more note is that we will have Spanish-English interpretation, so please just click on the interpretation button for the language that you're most comfortable in. So, without further ado, it's my great pleasure now to turn to Prerna, who's going to start with some opening remarks about the key ingredients of girl intentional programming. Over to you. Thanks, Prerna.
Thank you, Nicola, and I'm delighted to be here, and welcome to all the participants and attendees. UNICEF is really pleased to co-sponsor this event with our partners ODI Engage, and we're delighted to work with them to advance the evidence base to identify and scale and support the work that we all do collectively for girls to help them to realize their aspirations, their dreams and hopes, despite sometimes difficult realities. The majority of girls in low and middle income countries live with multiple child rights deprivations, which contribute to cumulative disadvantage as they transition through adolescence. Many deprivations experienced by girls have similar root causes, for example, patriarchal norms, controls over sexuality and poverty, and common structural features such as regressive policies. These may have manifested over many years and decades, and sometimes longer, leading to intergenerational cycles of disadvantage. UNICEF is soon launching its new Gender Action Plan, which identifies a central focus on adolescent girls. We hear a lot about accelerator strategies, but we feel that adolescent girls and young women are an acceleration population, but with the potential to transform not only their own lives, but those of their communities, societies, and nations. To move beyond the victimhood narrative, girls need to be reconceptualized, not as weak or in need of protection, but instead, we are proposing to direct attention to their self-efficacy, their resilience, and their skills. I take this moment to share with you a diagram which proposes the components for a girl intentional approach. Apologies, I'll just make it large. And here we see that this diagram is really drawn from the evidence and validated by experience in a number of countries. We see the 4 key components here around adolescent assets, including knowledge, skills, and competencies, adolescent agency, including self-efficacy, goal setting, and empowerment, an enabling environment, including community safety and responsive services, and finally, networks and opportunities for engagement, participation, contribution, and mentorship. These approaches have also experienced challenges, and as defined in the bar below, a few of them are at scale. Many are not national systems-based responses, which often makes them unsustainable ventures. Access to services are not always secured for girls, and frequently they are not gender responsive or adolescent friendly. We also struggle with how to put the components together in a meaningful way and which to prioritize when resources are limited. Finally, to scale and support girls, we rely on champions and political will. Despite this, girls can be very much a central part of how, and bringing girls' voices to become a central part of how we make girl intentional approaches work is an important direction going forward. I'm looking forward to learning and hearing from our panelists on their experiences. So thanks, Nicola, over to you.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Prerna. So now I would like to turn over to the panel to get your reflections. And so I'd like to begin with a question for you, Maria. And if you could reflect on what are the unique challenges in the Andean context in terms of developing programs that support girls' rights and agency in the health field, and including with regard to sexual and reproductive health.
Ante todo, muchas gracias por la invitación, por la posibilidad de estar conversando con ustedes. Y bueno, yo creo que el desafío más grande es que nosotros todos tenemos que dar un ambiente, un entorno, un environment que sea seguro, que sea predecible y que sea igualitario. Eso lo dicen claramente en el Handbook de Oxford que editó Prerna, y es justo lo que pide una adolescente de mi país, una adolescente peruana. Ella no quiere más o menos oportunidades, lo que quiere es iguales oportunidades. Y yo creo que eso es lo más importante. Por un lado, que nuestros niños y adolescentes tengan las capacidades, los conocimientos, las competencias, pero el otro lado somos nosotros, que les demos las oportunidades. Y yo creo que este tema, lo más importante es tener un enfoque de curso de vida, porque para que participen en igualdad de condiciones, tienen que saber participar, poder participar y querer participar. Y para poder participar tienen que tener conocimientos, competencias, habilidades, pero tienen que tener un grupo de adultos desde sus familias, sus escuelas, sus, digamos, gobiernos locales, nacionales, desde todo el mundo, agencias de cooperación, agencias que favorezcan que la mujer desde el comienzo tenga las mismas oportunidades y el mismo acceso a todo. Y principalmente el mismo acceso al poder. Porque no solamente que es que tenga las mismas profesiones, sino también que pueda dirigir y pueda ser parte de del grupo decisor, ¿no? Que es el que pone las líneas importantes en cada país. Yo creo que ese es el reto más importante. Y reconocer que hay diferentes adolescencias. Hay adolescencias que tienen más vulnerabilidades que otras. Por ejemplo, pobreza extrema, migrantes, poblaciones indígenas, poblaciones discapacitadas, LGTB, poblaciones que en este momento, poblaciones que están quedando desválidas por la pandemia. Mi país, Perú, es uno de los que más muertas tiene de esta pandemia y un montón de adolescentes y niños están quedando sin protección. Entonces, digamos, los abordajes tienen que ser personalizados, no todos son iguales. Digamos, lo peor que podemos hacer es tratar igual a los diferentes. No, cada uno necesita algo diferente, pero tenemos que comenzar desde que son pequeños. Desde el momento que le permitimos a la niña a que dé sus ideas, a que hable, a que no importa lo que diga, va a ser respetado. Porque yo creo que en el fondo este es un tema de derechos humanos. El día que nosotros comprendamos que el del costado tiene los mismos derechos que nosotros, el mundo será mejor. Ahí quedó.
Thank you so much, Maria. So are you able to give us perhaps some examples as to what is happening in the Andes, given the wider challenges that you've talked about in ensuring equal opportunities and rights, and particularly with regard to ensuring adolescent girls' access to sexual and reproductive health services and support?
La normativa quiere decir todas las normas, leyes, documentos que hay en nuestros países, favorecen ¿cómo se llama? La incorporación de las adolescentes a nuestros servicios de salud. Pero una cosa es la normativa y otra cosa es la realidad. Se sabe muy bien que la cultura tiene que ver con el ingreso o no a los servicios de salud. Y un gran problema que hay en la región andina es el embarazo en adolescentes. Y sabemos muy bien que para disminuir el embarazo en adolescentes tenemos que tener educación sexual, ¿no? Educación en sexualidad, que no todos los países lo tienen plenamente. Segundo, el tema de servicios de salud que respondan no solo a las necesidades de los adolescentes, sino prioritariamente a sus expectativas y deseos. Y tercero, lo que dije al comienzo, oportunidades. Porque si yo no tengo oportunidades para ser parte de un seguro de salud, muy difícil que yo llegue a tener método de planificación familiar para evitar un embarazo no deseado, ¿no? Entonces, hay en nuestros países, esos países que están, digamos, uno de nuestros indicadores principales en salud sexual y reproductiva en nuestros países es embarazo en adolescente. porque nosotros tenemos los dos grupos, de los adolescentes tempranas de 10 a 14 años, que está relacionada con violencia, y los adolescentes tardíos de 15 a 19, ¿no? Que eso es prácticamente parte de las costumbres de nuestro país, que se compromete jóvenes. Pero ¿cuál es el tema? El tema es que haya un acercamiento entre normas, servicios y lo que los chicos quieren y las chicas quieren. Digamos, respetar a la mujer en el sentido que no solo tiene una vida reproductiva, sino tiene una vida productiva, y que puede ser ingeniera, que puede ser matemática, que puede, ¿no? Digamos, hay muchas cosas que limitan, pero está cambiando, eso está cambiando mucho, y hay diferente desarrollo en los países. Pero hay países exitosos en el tema de, por ejemplo, embarazo en adolescentes. Tenemos a Chile, tenemos a Uruguay, ¿no? Que tienen sus sistemas que se acercan más a los adolescentes. Ahora, tiene que haber tiene que haber un enfoque holístico, ¿no? No solo es, el adolescente tiene que estar preparada, la familia tiene que apoyarlo, la escuela tiene que estar de acuerdo, la política tiene que favorecerlo, porque al final lo que uno quiere es que cada uno pueda llegar al mayor nivel de sus potencialidades, ¿no? Y pueda tener, creo que lo más importante es que pueda tener una vida digna, ¿no? Que pueda ejercer libremente lo que quiere hacer, por supuesto respetando los derechos de los demás, ¿no? Sí hay experiencias exitosas, hay servicios de salud sexual y reproductiva en varios países, ¿no? Pero en este momento ya sabemos que el tema de salud sexual y reproductiva no va solo, tiene que ir dentro de todo un enfoque, y un tema prioritario que ha aparecido en los últimos años, pero que ahora es mucho más evidente, es la salud mental, ¿no? La salud mental va de la mano con la salud sexual y reproductiva, va todo junto, es un paquete. Y vuelvo a repetir que cada adolescente es especial, ¿no? Tiene que tener, y cada niña y mujer adolescente son especiales. No es lo mismo un adolescente criada en una ciudad grande que criada en una etnia amazónica, por ejemplo, ¿no? Y en eso estamos trabajando muchísimo, porque eso creo que ese es el core del asunto.
Great, so thank you. Some really fantastic points there about the need to have a systems-wide approach, but also an integrated packages of services to realize adolescent girls' rights, but also then the diversity of needs that they have. So taking some of those ideas, I'd now like to turn to you, Kenan. And if you could reflect on some of the challenges that you face working in humanitarian contexts, but if you could highlight in particular some of the specific challenges that adolescent girls are facing in the Jordanian context compared to boys.
Thank you, Nicola. It's great to be here with you all today. I actually would like to move a bit from the traditional and well-known problems facing adolescent girls and focus more on a newly emerged challenge related to the digital access. Although the digital divide is not a new subject, but it has never been more critical than today. With the emerge of COVID, the lack of access to internet and devices imposed a serious challenge for adolescent girls. So the digital divide should be taken more into consideration, in my opinion. While also the digital divide is facing vulnerable adolescents regardless of their gender, it's a holistic problem, but it is evident from the data we have, at least here in Jordan and the Middle East, that girls have less access to internet and devices than boys. For example, I would refer to the Gage study baseline, which has on Jordan data, which has indicated that around 43%, girls are 43% less likely to have phones, and girls are also 17% less likely to have internet access. So I think we need an urgent and serious effort to bridge the digital gap, where building on the idea of building back better, which the UN and other organizations are working on it now, I think we need to use the COVID challenge and turn it into an opportunity. So while we are responding now to the newly emerged challenges due to the COVID, we can design our programs in a gender responsive manner from the beginning to avoid being too late later on. So what we are doing in Jordan, for example, and what I reflect and recommend actually, first, while we are responding, to make sure that we are providing an equal access to adolescents, boys and girls, to remote services through the provision of necessary tools and devices and internet. For example, here in Jordan, through our work through the mechanic program, we will start distributing, actually we started, so in the coming also couple of weeks, we will continue to distribute around 15,000 tablets supported with the internet access, where we are making sure that those tablets do not favor boys over girls, and we are taking a serious consideration for that. Two, I think we really need to, in our programs, to focus on the issue related to the cyberbullying and cyber violence. And that's by providing the needed psychosocial support for the survival of cyber violence, for example. Also work on age-appropriate internet safety programs targeting both parents and adolescents. And this is what we will start here through the mechanic program next week with some implementing partners. Finally, and also most maybe importantly, I think it's very important from now to engage girls, adolescents in advanced, let's say, certified courses focusing on the digital skills, which can help them on the long run to get into the labor market. As we know, for decades, mobility was one of the factors which limited female youth for entering the workforce. But with the current situation, it is an opportunity to build the adolescent girls' digital skills so they are better prepared to have a job opportunity in the near future. Of course, if the budget allow or there is capacity, those programs should be also linked somehow to the cash support, which we are doing here in Jordan, for example, to limit as well the early marriage and more the traditional kind of problems actually for facing adolescent girls. So that's it from my side, Nicola.
Great, thanks very much, Kenan. So, I mean, I think you've touched on a really critical point about the digital divide. I think I'll now hand the floor to Selin, because Selin is at the forefront of trying to tackle that within the Turkish context. So Selin, it would be great to get your reflections on what some of the challenges are facing adolescent girls in getting involved in science, technology, and innovation. But if you could also reflect on how you first got involved, what inspired you to move into this field, and then link it to the broader challenges that you've seen now that you're an activist in the space. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So as an 18-year-old gender equality activist from Istanbul, Turkey, I would say I've always wanted to be a change maker. Of course, I always had this idea in mind, but how my journey has officially started was when my 6-year-old little brother once told me that I was lucky because I could just simply get married and didn't have to worry about university or work. So that was probably the moment when I apprehended I was going to be, well, I had to be the voice of change. So because that was the moment when I fully realized the risk of this mindset created by the society that could affect a little child's thought structure. So since growing up, I have always had very strong role models in my life, women who made a difference in the world, women who did not live their purpose because people told them they couldn't do. So I would say with their goals in mind, I remember promising myself to take action in the morning, because if not me, then who? If not now, then when, which is actually he for she's slogan. And I have sent an email to UN Women to become involved in the he for she movement. Only if I knew sending that email would completely change my life. So In a nutshell, that is how I became the youngest representative of UN Women's He for She movement. But being an activist, day by day, you find more things that have to be changed. And my motto is, be the change you want to see in the world, by Gandhi. We need all hands on deck. And that means clearing hurdles for women and girls as they navigate their careers in science, technology, engineering, and math, said the former First Lady Michelle Obama. Thinking about these wise words, I have noticed a disproportion in the distribution of male and female students in STEM clubs and extracurricular activities at my own school. So with the hope of changing that, I have approached my school's robotics team. It was such an honor to see their tremendous support for the cause. And we all wanted to encourage girls to be involved at the forefront of the STEM field. So thinking of how to the ways to reach our goal and reach out to young girls around Turkey, we have brought the Girls Who Code movement to our country and became the one and only Girls Who Code Club. So as Girls Who Code Turkey, we have started hosting workshops, for instance, or conferences, even career planning days where we had interviews with women leaders in the STEM field in Turkey. In fact, on our first virtual career planning day, which was a couple of weeks ago, we had the honor of having Dell Technology country manager as our guest. And of course, before the COVID, we used to visit public high schools or public middle schools, and we would focus on teaching the basics of coding to young girls and to show them what science could actually look like, what a programmer could actually look like. Because there are so many gender-based stereotypes around that topic, but it's very much brushed under the carpet. And that's why no one really realizes it. When someone doesn't point it out, we don't really realize them. So I think it's very important for us to just speak up because in 1995, 37% of computer scientists were women. And we talk about innovation and technology and world changing, but today the percentage is only 24%. It is unfortunately an inevitable fact that this percentage will continue to decrease if we do not act. In addition, we know that from the research, the biggest loss of interest for girls in STEM is between the ages of 13 and 17. But despite this, the authorized institutions still do not take the necessary actions, even though they claim it otherwise. I would like to share an experience of mine that shows the institutions that seem to be supporting adults and girls in STEM and making PR material for this important purpose. So I was at a sponsorship meeting with my team for Girls Who Code with a very well-known company in Turkey. And the gentleman who held the meeting with us, even though he knew that their leader was me, neither extended his hand nor asked my name nor my ideas. Throughout the meeting, this company, which ignored me during the whole meeting, could not focus on the real problem because of praising the boys in our team and their intelligence of robotics and coding, etc. And would you believe me, whenever I share this story with a fellow STEMinist friend, they always say something similar has happened to them also. Even this little example proves how global this problem is and how we need global solutions.
Fantastic. So very inspiring words there, Selin. I think it'd be great now to sort of open up to the panel more broadly to hear a bit about some of the strategies that you're undertaking to try and tackle some of these discriminatory gender norms that really act as such a powerful barrier, whether it's in the field of sexual and reproductive health or STEM. So Kenan, perhaps reflecting on sort of the refugee context in which you're working, how are you trying to engage with the wider environment, whether it's boys and men or families or communities, to get over some of these key hurdles that you've talked about vis-a-vis the digital space?
I mean, currently we are working in solving those digital aspects with different partners. And I think a key success for us in Jordan was, and through the Mechanic program, is dealing with a deep-rooted national partner, regardless of their background. So some of them, they have they are faith-based, some of them are not. But the bottom line, they are trusted by the community they are in. And this is where the center, our center exists, is in the most vulnerable area. And that was a key success for us. And the key success was to actually shift the ownership of the program to those deep-throated national partner and the government as well. So I mean, the buy-in of the government, it goes without saying, it's a key success for any project on the long term. I mean, sustainability is a very big term, and it's very hard now in the humanitarian cause, the context, we all know how complicated that is. But at least ownership will give you some aspect of that sustainability. And now the funding is another aspect, but also those organizations, they have their own resources. They have been in Jordan, for example, before when UNICEF offered, before the Syria crisis, when UNICEF office in Jordan was maybe 20 people, today we are over 100 responding to the Syria crisis. So all what I want to say, investing on the national system, which is including the national partner, and give them the ownership will help us in sustainability, but also will help us in the quality of the current response, because it's very important that those people, the frontliner who are responding on a day-to-day, they feel that those programs are for them because they are serving those communities. From my experience, that was very evident in March 2020 when the COVID came into place. And this is where it took us 1 week to be able to respond, not because UNICEF team only was able to do that, because we have hundreds of frontliners who are keen to support their community. And the program in that sense shifted to the remote support in 1 week. So I think this is a very key, in addition, of course, to other elements related, for example, to provide the integrated package, which tackle not only the children, for example, or the adolescents, it's focused on the whole family through the better parenting, through other type of services. And I think there's another key aspect, which is the ability to be flexible in our response. So our design for the program should be flexible from the beginning. I mean, I lost count how many we changed some aspect on the program now, but because the world now is very fast, it's changing very fast. And the adolescents and in general, regardless of their gender, their needs are changing very fast and they are exposed. They have idea about what's going on everywhere. And it is our duty to be able to design our programs quickly to respond to their needs. So, of course, it has to go from the bottom-up approach. We have to listen to them and listen to the frontliner and be flexible as well. And actually, that requires some donor flexibility, if I want to put it there. So to avoid the frameworks, which goes from year to year the same. No, every year you will have a different thing. With COVID and without COVID, the world was moving fast, but now it's changing on a daily basis. Before, maybe it was changing on a quarterly basis. So this is, from my experience, the best three areas where I can highlight. Over from my side, Nicola.
Thanks very much, Kenan. Some really critical points about sort of anchoring these programs in community networks. I wonder, Maria, if you might reflect now, given your close engagement with ministerial stakeholders, what kind of steps you have been taking in terms of getting their buy-in, fostering their political will to invest in adolescent girls?
Bueno, nosotros vinimos trabajando hace muchísimos años, ¿no? Digamos, en el 2005, 2003 sacamos el primer Plan Nacional de Acción por la Infancia y la Adolescencia. Y en este momento estamos entrando ya al tercero, o al cuarto, porque tiene un tiempo. Este año el Perú cumple 200 años de ser un Perú independiente, entonces para el bicentenario se están cerrando todos los planes. ¿Qué características tiene este plan? El cuarto objetivo es participación y con, digamos, ¿qué es lo bueno? Participan todos los sectores del gobierno. Quiere decir, está el Ministerio de Salud, el Ministerio de Educación, el Ministerio de Defensa, el Ministerio de Turismo, todos los ministerios. Y también está el Consejo Consultivo de Niños, Niñas y Adolescentes. Entonces, este Consejo Consultivo tiene representatividad en 500 provincias de todo el país y está conformado por chicos de 12 a 18 años, ¿no? Que participan en las reuniones y paralelamente van viendo. Por ejemplo, hoy día UNICEF en Perú hace una presentación de los presupuestos, porque nosotros tenemos una ley, digamos, una cosa en la que creemos mucho. Sin presupuestos no hay derechos. If you don't have budget, you don't have rights. Eso es muy claro para nosotros. Entonces, este plan tiene varias áreas y son no solamente, digamos, género, igualdad de género atraviesa todo el plan, ¿no? Ahora, como en todas partes, hay regiones, porque mi país tiene 25 regiones que están más avanzadas que otras, definitivamente en el tema, ¿no? Por ejemplo, hay regiones que han puesto la paridad, hemos conseguido la paridad. ¿Qué significa la paridad? Que si un hombre y una mujer se presentan a un cargo directivo, si tienen las mismas condiciones, se le da preferencia a la mujer hasta lograr la igualdad, hasta que sean pares. Y eso lo hemos conseguido en el Congreso, lo hemos conseguido en los gobiernos, lo hemos conseguido en un montón de sitios, pero no siempre se hace en realidad. ¿Ok? Entonces, la participa, y siempre van en este consejo consultivo, ellos son los que ponen los temas, ¿no? Y un tema que han puesto, pero con mucha fuerza, es cambio climático, ¿no? Es un tema que han puesto con mucha fuerza, es cambio climático, que no es un tema de los mayores, es un tema que interesa más a los jóvenes, ¿no? ¿Qué cosa se ha logrado? Se ha logrado, por ejemplo, que se aumente el presupuesto para la atención de, digamos, adolescentes. Hay un poco más de presupuesto. ¿Qué se ha logrado? Que salga una norma que permita que las adolescentes mujeres puedan ir a los servicios de planificación familiar sin papás. Antes no era posible eso, ahora pueden ir ellas solas, ¿no? Se ha logrado que se incorporen dentro de los indicadores dirigidos a adolescentes mujeres, a niñas, ¿no? Indicadores que nos midan, quiere decir, se ha logrado esta diferencia. Y comparto, y un tema importantísimo es el tema de la conectividad, del Internet, ¿no? El año pasado acabamos de lograr que haya una tarifa plana, que no cueste Internet en ciertos sectores más pobres, que eso es importante. Y se ha puesto Internet libre en todas las plazas, en las plazas principales de todo el país, ¿no? Yo creo que eso es sumamente importante para la igualdad. Ya UNICEF en uno de sus estados mundiales, hace como 2 o 3 años, habló de esta otra desigualdad, que era la desigualdad digital, que es importantísima, pues, ¿no? Quien no está conectado en estos momentos en que toda la educación se está dando por internet o por televisión, si uno no está conectado, se sigue quedando atrás, ¿no? Y otro tema es que nosotros sí, bueno, hay una década olvidada, que yo creo que es en la que más tenemos que trabajar, desde el punto de vista de salud. De 0 a 5 años es materno-infantil, no hay problema. De 5 a 14 años es la década, the missing one, ¿no? Bajo OPS le dice the missing one, the missing decade. Hay como una década que no es, digamos, se hace cosas, pero no tan dirigidas a esa década. Y yo creo que esa década es importantísima. Es una cosa que no la podemos dejar de lado. ¿Qué otras experiencias? Bueno, ha habido planes para adolescentes en conflicto con la ley. Ha habido planes para prevención del embarazo en adolescente, ¿no? Y en todos esos planes siempre ha habido presencia de adolescentes. Siempre se ha tomado en cuenta. Pero como repito, tenemos que lograr todo, pues, ¿no? Por un lado, la parte política, que esté de acuerdo. Por otro lado, el ministerio, que tenga la normativa y que tenga los anticonceptivos, que es uno de los temas principales, o que tenga las vacunas, o que tenga esto. Y por otro lado, la familia que apoye y el adolescente y la adolescente empoderada, ¿no? Es un tema así. No solo es un tema de una sola persona, ¿no? Digamos, yo creo que el enfoque tiene que ser holístico, curso de vida e integrado, ¿no? Todas las áreas juntas, ¿no? ¿Qué otras experiencias? Tenemos la mesa de lucha contra la pobreza, que es otra que lo hablaríamos después. Ok.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. I think some really critical points there about ensuring that adolescents' voices are represented even in planning processes, but then also the accountability that needs to be there. Which is a critical point. I think it brings me back to the work that you're doing, Selin. I know that one of the things that you've been focusing on is how to ensure that the school environment is more accountable to the voices and ambitions of adolescent girls. And so in that process, how are you managing to bring on board teachers and adolescent boys in that journey, and reflecting back to some of the reflections you made about your own personal journey there?
So I think one thing we forget very often is that technology is and can be a powerful tool for advancing gender equality, and it has the potential to empower adults and girls both economically and socially. So first of all, technology provides vital access to information, to services, to social connection, to life-changing opportunities, such as circling back, education and employment. But, and most of the jobs of 21st century, if you want to be in the business world, you have to have ICT skills. And how can we provide girls with digital and ICT skills? We can do that through prioritizing education. But as you said, there are so many stereotypes, even within the school education system, for instance. In our own personal lives, for example. One thing that was that is very much close to my heart, actually, which, is working with high school boys, for example, my peers. We tackled a very big obstacle. Unfortunately, there are so many societal stereotypes about what a feminist looks like, for instance. Speaking from my observations and experiences throughout the years, I have realized how open the word feminism is to misunderstandings, especially about feminine over masculine, because it has a feminine in the word in it, but it's very superficial. For example, my teachers, my friends from school, I have met so many of my male teachers who were claiming that there was no way on earth that they were feminists, followed by the sentence, because they were against the idea of women being superior. They were supporting the idea of equality for all. Pretty ironic, isn't it? Since their response is literally the definition of feminism. And from a high schooler's perspective, I feel like one of the reasons why boys feel like they cannot be feminists is because there is a wrong belief in Turkey, like by calling yourself a feminist, you're giving up on your masculine side and look more fragile. And I think that especially in Turkey, in my region, because of the word feminism and gender equality being treated as a taboo, there is a blame attached to it. So it makes things even harder for, especially circling back, teenage boys to openly call themselves feminists, because no one likes to be judged, and all of us want to fit into a box while fit into the society, you know. So I would say our best option is educating people about why gender equality benefits us all. Gender inequality is rampant everywhere. For example, we still think that only women can be feminists. Men are still being criticized for being too emotional. In Turkey, victim blaming and violence against women and femicides is still a massive problem. Millions of girls' education are being disrupted because they cannot go to school due to their gender. Men are still thought to be the breadwinners in the family in Turkey, which is a huge burden, of course, a psychological burden. So there are so many obstacles and so many challenges we're facing, and all of them are very much interconnected. And the reason is just taboos, and because gender equality is being politicized in Turkey, unfortunately. So as I said, even in my school, my teachers, they don't have much information about what's going on, and it is so normalized in Turkey. So this is something we should be focusing on, I would say, and this is what we are trying to do. Within Girls Who Code Turkey as well, we have so many members, both boys and girls, because gender equality benefits us all. That's just that simple, actually.
Thanks so much, Selin, for those reflections. I've just been watching some of the questions that are coming in from the audience, and one of the key themes that's sort of been woven in amongst those questions is in the context of the lockdowns and the remote service delivery during the pandemic. There are concerns that the most disadvantaged adolescents and adolescent girls in particular may not be being reached, including through some of these digital solutions that we've been discussing. So I wonder if the panelists could reflect on what approaches you've been taking and what more needs to be done to really ensure that in these kinds of crisis contexts that the most disadvantaged young people are able to be included in services and in accessing their full rights. Who would like to start off?
I mean, it's not an easy question, if I can start. So basically, violence is, I'm seeing the question, and actually there are great questions, and some of them needs a 30-minute discussion each. The violence is on an increase for women in general, whether they are adolescents or youth or even married women. And that's evident, and we see it every day. And the more the lockdown increase or it's tight, you see it more, and that's for obvious reasons as well. I mean, there's no easy answer to that, but I can tell you, at least from what we are doing in Jordan. So at least for those who are under our radar, and they used to be under our radar before the pandemic started, we made sure to, first thing we did, all of our frontliner, we trained them how to provide remote support, how to respond to such violence cases from day one. And then we made sure to stay in touch with those, whether adolescents or women, with all of them, making sure that at least they are listened to. So through phone calls, through WhatsApp, but we are here talking about a program which already have a beneficiary. Now, if you don't have the beneficiary, that's really hard. And this is where you need the government involvement. And here it will be harder. But if you have a program and you have already a beneficiary, you just make sure to stay in touch with them and make sure that you are reaching out to them, not waiting for them to reach out to you. And this is where we'll be hands-on. But that's okay on a small scale. On a larger scale, it will be much more complicated when we talk about big countries or on a national level. So that's what I think from my side. Over.
Thank you, Kenan. And so, Maria, in the context of the Andes, where you have very remote communities for geographical reasons, what kinds of strategies is your organization employing to try and reach those girls in the current context?
Una cosa importante es lo que dijimos al comienzo. No puedes tratar igual a los que están en diferentes contextos, ¿no? Entonces, primero, no nos olvidemos de la radio. La radio está más cerca de la gente en mi país. La radio llega absolutamente hasta donde no llega nadie. Si tú vas a las partes de amazónicas, andinas, todos los chicos tienen colgada su radio para poder estar en contacto. Así que se utiliza mucho el tema de radios locales para dar consejos, para hablar, para compartir. Después tenemos en todo el país, hay los encargados de adolescencia en todo el país, ¿no? Son los puntos focales. Entonces, la indicación que se dio fue que los puntos focales trataran de comunicarse con la gente, porque esa fue la indicación, ¿no? Trataran de, porque, digamos, el alcance de Internet en Perú es más o menos 60%, no me acuerdo en este momento mucho, pero la mayoría tiene celular, ¿no? Hasta en los sitios más lejanos hay celulares, ¿no? Entonces, que no es por la pandemia, desde antes hay, digamos, seguimiento por WhatsApp, seguimiento por SMS, y tratar de coordinar, ¿no? Pero acá viene otro asunto, ¿no? Digamos, no vamos a negar que esta lockout, esta cuarentena, este aislamiento, sí ha influido negativamente. Esa es una realidad. Los estudios son claros, ¿no? De que hay más índices de ansiedad, de depresión, de estrés, son claros. Lo que tenemos que hacer es revertirlos, ¿no? Que no se vuelvan constantes, que no se queden para siempre, que la gente sepa que hay formas de comunicarse. Se ha instalado todo lo que es la teleconsulta, ¿no? Digamos, la telemedicina, la teleorientación, ¿no? Justo antier hemos tenido un webinar de telesalud y los avances en los países andinos, ¿no? Y hay muchos puntos, pero definitivamente hay otras formas, ¿no? Y esta es una anécdota, ¿no? Hay cartas en los ríos, en el Amazonas, ¿no? Digamos, cartas que se van recibiendo y se van contestando a través de una radio, porque ellos son los que están más lejos, ¿no? Pero yo creo que lo más importante es que sepan que pueden conversar con alguien. Entonces se han abierto, si ustedes buscan en la página web de una organización, están todos los números abiertos de los 6 países, ¿no? Para cualquier cosa, más que todo para problemas de salud mental, porque un área que se ha dado mucho es salud mental. Ahora, el tema grande es la disposición de anticonceptivos, porque en los países se cerró el primer nivel, ¿no? Los servicios de primer nivel se cerraron al comienzo, ahora ya están abiertos. Entonces ahí yo creo que ha habido delay, ha habido demoras, ¿no? En la entrega. Nos daremos cuenta en estos meses, ¿no? Cuando justo en esta semana, la próxima semana, salen los indicadores de partos, ¿no? Que nos daremos cuenta si ha aumentado, porque ya el embarazo adolescente había comenzado a disminuir. Vamos a ver si por esta lockdown ha aumentado. Pero hay muchas formas creativas, hay muchas formas, creo yo. Uh-huh.
Thank you very much, Maria, for those important reflections about the need for a hybrid approach to reaching the most disadvantaged. Arlette, you have been eagerly awaited. So I think some people are wondering why we haven't turned to you. Arlette is going to provide a wrap up for our conversation. I know that we would all love to have a lot more time. There's some fantastic questions that have been coming through. But I would very much like to give Arlette the floor to reflect on what some of the key lessons are that are emerging from the discussion today, and what all of this means for the broader gender equality process that UN Women is spearheading as we move into the processes in Mexico and France, and particularly we'd love to get your thoughts, Arlette, on how adolescent girls' voices and agency can be made more visible within those processes. So over to you, thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicola, for giving me the floor. And first of all, I want to say thank you to the organizer, especially UNICEF, for inviting UN Women in this timely webinar. I must confess that the previous speaker have really facilitated my task, as they have almost presented very interesting country experience and the best practices, and even challenges that are really being used, be useful for the next CSW, but also the launching of the Gender Equality Forum at the end of this month. The webinar of today is really to discuss about ways and strategies and approaches to put the girls at the center of development. And I was so happy to hear about all these great experiences and opportunities that have been going on in countries, especially in Turkey, in Jordan, and the examples given by Maria. And I want now to present another opportunity, a very strategic and high-level opportunity, which is the Gender Equality Forum, which is, as I say, a strategic opportunity to raise girls' voice and issues. We heard a lot of issues that Selin has just presented in terms of leadership, in terms of capacities, in terms of access to technology, and in terms of how to translate into action the dreams, the aspiration, the needs of young girls and adolescents. So I'm going to structure my presentation into three key questions. The first one is, what is the Gender Forum Equality? Maybe some participants have heard about it, maybe not. So I think it's important to give a small presentation of what is the Gender Forum Equality and the Action Coalition. In the second part, I'm going to explain what the Action Coalition are about. And at the end, I'm going to finish with how we can ensure a meaningful participation of girls to be sure that we advance their rights and we have a transformative change in the society. So what is the Gender Forum Equality about? The Gender Forum Equality about is, as I said, a unique opportunity to really put gender on the table of a discussion, negotiation, on the table of the decision makers, because as you remember, we are celebrating the 25 years after Beijing platform. And we all agreed, government, development partners, civil society organization, women's rights defenders, minority groups, women living with handicap, everybody, we agreed that yes, there's a lot has been done in terms of progress. We can see significant progress on women's representation and leadership, on women economic empowerment, access to science and technology, but those progress are really slow. And the previous speaker have highlighted a lot of challenges, especially in the area around access to technology. And those gender gaps are still too many. So we cannot wait. Your youth people and girls are saying that they cannot wait 2 more decades to see change really happening. So what could we do? And the youth are saying that it's really time to do things differently. We have taken 2 decades to see change in terms of legal framework, in terms of access to health and other important gains that we have, but the change are too slow. So what should we do? And the Gender Equality Forum, it's really, as Maria said, a very big opportunity to listen to youth, to listen to girls. And when we have listened to Selin, you can see the level of passion, the level of enthusiasm, the level of innovation, innovative idea that we really need at the level of genders and the women's rights defender to see how really we can fast track the change and the progress related to gender equality. So the Gender Equality Forum, as I said, is really to accelerate, fast track social change and achieve progress toward SDG 5 through the mobilization of government, private sector, CSOs, women's rights defenders, social influencers, and particularly youth. And in the principle of leaving no one behind, to listen also to minority communities, refugees, internal displaced persons. And we heard Kenan talking about a lot about that. The Gender Equality Forum is structured around 6 action coalitions, which are interrelated, interconnected, to really focus and emphasis on the fact that gender issues are all interconnected. So they cannot tackle one issue and avoiding another one, because all of them, if you are talking of access to internet, it's not only giving, I don't know, phone or tablets, but it's also in a broader macroeconomic system. You have to think of how you can tackle other issues related to poverty, to economic, and so on. So the 6 coalition areas are gender-based violence. We have talked of that. We have seen a lot of a big increment of cases of violence, especially during the COVID pandemic. So we need to change. We need to see how we can see really change. We have a lot of conventions about women's rights, anti-violence against women, but what is the problem? Why all these rights, why all these strategies and policies are not really translated into action? Maria gave us some interesting example about one approach that they have been using, gender budgeting, which is quite a very key and important approach, because the most important gap in gender equality issues is related to funding, to resource mobilization, and to budget. The second action coalition is talking of economic justice and rights. The third one is about sexual and reproductive health. The 5th one is about technology and innovation for gender equality. We heard a lot about Selin and Kenan talking of access, the challenges, for girls to access to technology. And if something is not done now, the impact will be very huge, and the gap is going to continue and continue and continue. And we can find ourselves 20 years after talking again of this gap of technology and innovation. And the last one is about feminist movement and leadership. And this one is very important for the youth, because we are talking here of the intergenerational conversation and dialogue that we need to put in place to be sure that we are taking into account the aspiration of the youth. So those action coalition will mainly strengthen, wants to really prioritize advocacy to increase public and private investment. And as I said, the example given by Maria about gender budgeting is really important and should be presented, during the CSW and the Mexico launching of Gender Equality Forum to demonstrate that it is possible. It is really possible to invest on gender equality and fast track this social change. How the Gender Equality Forum will ensure to support adolescents and girls. There are a lot of mechanisms, and among the mechanisms, there's a youth task force, which is led by youth and the girls organization. They have been organizing a lot of consultation since last year, and they have been able to develop a strategic plan in collaboration with the Beijing Plus 25 Youth Task Force. And the pillar of their strategy is really connected to what I have heard during this webinar. They are talking of, they have proposed activities, intervention around capacity building, focusing on leadership and communication training to ensure that girls and young people understand the process and the opportunity to participate and influence, because you can participate, but the most important is really to influence the table of the decision makers. The second
sorry, I'm being signaled that we're out of time, but I think the role of adolescent girls being able to influence decision makers at the decision-making table is a really powerful point to end on. You've done a fantastic job of pulling together all the different strands of a very complex conversation, so thank you so much for that. I think we will be able to share people's email addresses and related contact points. So if people would like to follow up more, I think we're just starting the conversation. That would be great. So at this point, I'd like to thank the panel so much for your very valuable insights, for all the time and thought that you've given today. And I think the conversation has really highlighted the importance of supporting adolescent girls' empowerment, voice and leadership across a range of contexts, from health to STEM to mental health and well-being and education, but also really highlighted that we need to have tailored and solutions, not just a one-size-fits-all approach. So thank you so much to everybody. Thank you too for everyone in the audience who's been so patient, stayed online and shared some fantastic questions. We'll be in touch with that. And please do tune in for the third event coming up in the series in April, focusing on women's political and legal voice and agency. So thank you all so much, and hope you have a great rest of the day. Thanks, and good luck for CSW next week.